Making Decisions. B2, Level 4, Intermediate English Story. Sophia had been at work since 8 a.m. She was fed up of the same old daily grind. This was not what she wanted from her life. She always wanted more. She had dreams and aspirations to be a doctor. Instead, she was sat in a boring office, listening to her colleagues bitch about other people in the team. All she wanted to do was go home. Sophia gained 4 A's at A-level. She was the star student of her year. She wanted to go to Cambridge University to study medicine, but she failed the interview process. She wasn't prepared for the questions they asked her, and she didn't have enough work experience to talk about. She spent her whole time at college studying. She'd never had a Saturday job like her friends. She wanted to get a job, but her parents wanted her to focus on her studies. So, instead of working on the weekends, she spent them studying. Luckily, her parents gave her a monthly allowance, which meant she could go out with her friends once a week. She always looked forward to Friday nights with her friends. Every Friday night, they'd get glammed up and head into town. They had the best time. She missed them. Most of her friends were now at university, but Sophia had decided to take a gap year. She thought it was for the best. She really needed to get some real-life work experience so she could get into Cambridge. Sophia worked 28 hours a week in an office. It was pretty boring. She was trying to save as much money as she could. University in the UK can get ridiculously expensive, and she wanted to be able to enjoy herself and not worry about cash. She got the job through a temping agency. She spent her days replying to emails, helping with invoices, and organising meetings. As Sophia only worked 28 hours, it meant she had 1 weekday off a week to do as she pleased. She spent this day volunteering at a local children's hospice. She loved her time there. People always asked her if it was a sad place, but it was the opposite. Everyone who worked there was so positive and talented. At the hospice, she helped with meal times and organising activities for the patients. She also shadowed the doctors and nurses. She learnt an incredible amount about what working in the healthcare sector is really like. She wished she'd done it sooner. Sophia realised that gaining hands-on experience meant so much more than hours chained to her desk studying. Of course, she had to be able to show that she could understand biology very well if she wanted to be a doctor. But working at the hospice made her realise how important it is to be able to connect with people. She loved talking to the staff and working with the children. Even though many of them were very sick, she liked to think that she made their days a little better. She started volunteering at the hospice in the summer after she received her A-level results. She knew she had to make the most of her year out of education. First on her list was to get a job, and the second was to find some relevant work experience to support her university application. Sophia had been volunteering and working in the office for 3 months when it was time to apply for university again. This time, she decided to apply for a university closer to home, If she went there, it would mean she could continue her volunteering at the hospice. She also applied for Cambridge and a university in London. Sophia had so much more to talk about in her UCAS application than she did last year. She described her experiences working in the office and how this helped her to become more organised. She listed the new programs she was able to use, and she detailed how she had developed a new system for processing customer queries. Although Sophia had expanded her skills and knowledge working in the office job, it was nothing compared to her experience at the hospice. When she started her university application, she realised how passionate she was about the things she had experienced and learnt, from helping set up activities to talking to the patients about their thoughts and fears. The problem was that there was a word limit on the application. She was struggling to narrow down the points she wanted to make. She decided to make an appointment to see her old personal tutor at college to go over her personal statement. She would also ask the tutor if she would be her reference for the application. Sophia finished what she could of her personal statement and printed it off, ready for her tutor to check. She arranged to meet with her the following day. It was strange for Sophia to think about going back to her old college. She only left 6 months ago, but so much had changed. It felt like her college days were a lifetime ago. The next day, Sophia went to the college and checked in with the receptionist who called her tutor. Sophia sat in the waiting room looking at the pictures of students who had gone on to do amazing things. She never realised that so many notable people had studied at her college. There were pictures of doctors, famous rock stars, and TV presenters all over the walls. She hoped that perhaps one day she could be on this wall of fame. She didn't want to be famous, though. She wanted to be successful. After a few minutes of waiting, her old personal tutor, Miss Turner, appeared. She was pleased to see Sophia. They chatted all the way to her office and reminisced about her time at the college. Once they sat down, Miss Turner went through Sophia's application and couldn't believe how much experience she had gained in such a short amount of time. "Wow, Sophia," she exclaimed. "If Cambridge doesn't take you this time, they're crazy. You've got way more experience than any of the other students here. I'll give you some practice questions to go over for the Cambridge interview. I mean, you've done it now, so you know what to expect, but it's always good to be prepared." "But I haven't even applied yet," said Sophia. She wasn't sure, deep down, if Cambridge was what she wanted anymore. Yes, of course, she knew it was one of the best universities in the world, and it would look amazing on her CV, but that wasn't so important to her anymore. There were so many other reputable universities in the UK that would be just as good. If she went to a university closer to home, it would also mean that she could keep volunteering at the hospice. She wanted to have her independence, but she also wanted to stay close to her family. She knew that if she went to Cambridge, she would be studying alongside some very privileged people who might not be able to relate to her. For Sophia, it was important to enjoy the social aspect of university just as much as the studying. After all, University is supposed to be one of the best times of your life. Sophia didn't want to be worrying about her peers. She wanted to be having fun. Sophia had visited Cambridge for her interview. The university and city were beyond beautiful, and everyone she met was lovely. Until working at the hospice, going to Cambridge had been her lifelong ambition, but now she was starting to feel differently. After spending an hour chatting with her tutor, Sophia walked home and thought about everything they had discussed. Miss Turner had given Sophia some useful tips for her personal statement. Now she had to go home, get on her laptop, and get all her ideas down on paper. Sophia made herself a strong cup of tea and got comfortable for a night of writing. She always found writing about herself to be a little embarrassing. She didn't know what to say and didn't want to sound big-headed or like she was exaggerating her experience. She made a list of 5 bullet points which she wanted to cover and started writing. It didn't take as long as she thought it would, and after 90 minutes, she was finished. She sent the statement off to her teacher to make the finishing touches. Now it was time to wait and see where she was accepted for an interview. She applied to 3 universities in the end: Cambridge, Sheffield, and Queen Mary in London. A few days later, Sophia received a confirmation email which explained that her application had now been submitted. "That's it," she thought to herself. "Now I play the waiting game." She wondered what she might do if she didn't get accepted again. Perhaps she could get an apprenticeship with the hospice. There was nothing else Sophia could do, so she threw herself into her work and her volunteering. In the evenings and on the weekends, she met up with friends who were back in town. She was having a great time. She was earning good money for an 18-year-old. The weeks passed by with no news, but Sophia didn't panic. She knew that thousands of students across the country, and even from abroad, were applying for the same courses. She just had to be patient and wait her turn. Finally, one sunny Tuesday morning, she received an email. She had been offered an interview for both Sheffield and Cambridge. She felt a mix of emotions, from fear to excitement to apprehension. Sophia had 3 weeks to prepare for the interviews. She watched YouTube videos, read blogs, and looked up potential interview questions on the internet. This time, she wanted to be fully prepared for what they were going to ask her. The first interview Sophia had was at Cambridge. She took the train to the city with her mum. Luckily, her interview was at 11 a.m, so afterwards they would have time to explore the city centre and go for food. Sophia also wanted to visit one of her favourite shops, the Cambridge Satchel Company. They arrived in the city early. Sophia always was an early bird. They walked around the beautiful cobbled streets and got a coffee. She felt strangely calm. She had done this before and she could do it again. The only difference was that this time she had so much more to say. Sophia went to the university and checked in. Her mum decided to wait in a nearby cafe and read her favourite book. Sophia sat and waited in the historic university reception until someone called her name and she was taken to the interview room. She was questioned for over half an hour about her A-level studies, about what made a good doctor, and about her experience at the hospice. She felt confident in her answers. When the interview was over, she thanked the interviewers, shook their hands, and left with her head held high. Sophia's mum was so proud of her. She would be the first generation of her family to go to university. She would also be the first doctor in the family. Sophia wasn't thinking that far ahead. Next, she had to prepare for her Sheffield interview, which was in 2 days. The next day, Sophia was back at work, but all she kept thinking about was her Cambridge interview and what she would change for her interview at Sheffield the next day. She had an early night. The next day, her dad drove her to Sheffield. If she gained a place at this university, she would be able to commute by car, which would save a lot of money on accommodation costs. More importantly, she would be able to continue volunteering at the hospice. From the moment she arrived at the Sheffield University campus, she loved it. She loved the city's hills and the way people talked. She also loved the Students' Union and the general vibe on campus. Something about Sheffield just clicked with her. Her dad waited in the Students' Union for her while she went for the interview. Some of the questions they asked her were difficult, but she asked them to rephrase, and then she was able to answer. Overall, the interview lasted 45 minutes. She was ready for some lunch afterwards. Later that night, she laid in bed thinking about what the future was going to hold. She had made some calculations and decided that even if Queen Mary University invited her for an interview, she wouldn't go. She loved London, but it was so expensive, and she wanted to stay closer to home. The next morning, she updated her UCAS status and retracted her offer from Queen Mary. Now it was between Cambridge and Sheffield. She could imagine studying at both universities. They both had brilliant reputations, and their course offerings were incredibly diverse and exciting. Sophia imagined that she was offered a place at both universities, and she made a pros and cons list. She discussed her concerns with her parents, but ultimately it was up to her. Sophia's parents were always supportive of her ambitions. The next few weeks passed by in a blur. Sophia was as busy as always, working, volunteering, and seeing friends. She also passed her driving test and decided to start saving money for a car. Finally, 3 weeks after her interviews, Sophia got an email to say Cambridge had made a decision. She was too nervous to open it. She decided to wait until Sheffield replied. She wanted to open both emails on the same day. Another 2 days passed. They were the 2 slowest days of Sophia's life. Finally, her phone pinged, and there it was, a response from Sheffield. She logged into UCAS to view her options. She didn't tell anyone she had received the replies. She wanted to keep it to herself for now. She didn't want to be influenced by other people. She took a deep breath as she clicked login. As the page loaded, she closed her eyes. All of a sudden, she was very nervous. What if she didn't get any offers at all? After a few moments, she opened her eyes. She couldn't believe what she saw. She had been accepted to both Cambridge and Sheffield. Sophia gasped. Her dream had come true, but somehow the decision felt harder than she thought. Sophia had always been a home bird. She liked to be around her home comforts and close to her friends and family. Now she had a new volunteering role at the hospice. She didn't want to leave it. But on the other hand, it had been her dream to study at Cambridge. Now she had the chance. Would she take it? Sophia decided to keep the news to herself for a few more days. She wanted to think about what she really wanted. She had lots of questions she needed to ask herself. Did she want to move away? Did she want to keep her volunteering role? Did she want to go to Cambridge? She spent the next few days doing lots of research. She did virtual university campus tours and read reviews for restaurants and clubs in Cambridge and Sheffield. She researched what the halls of residence looked like and how much it would cost her to live in each city. The weekend arrived and Sophia went to the hospice. She told one of the nurses her news. The nurse was so happy for her, but Sophia didn't seem so excited. After spending the day with the staff and patients, she knew she had her answer. That night, when Sophia was having dinner with her parents, she broke the news. They were both overjoyed. Sophia's dad even got a tear in his eye. After a few minutes, she told them that she didn't know what to do. Of course, Cambridge was her dream. She just wasn't sure if it was still her dream. Everyone knows that Cambridge University is one of the best in the world. If Sophia went there, she knew that her CV would shine. Having said that, Sheffield University also had an amazing reputation. Sophia didn't want to do anything she would regret. Her mum asked her a simple question. What does your gut tell you, Sophia? Forget the reputation and your CV and everything else. What do you want deep down? Sophia sat for a minute. It says Sheffield. I love this city. The campus was great, and I could still work at the hospice. But it's so hard to get into Cambridge. I just worry that people will think I'm daft for not taking it. Who cares what people think? Said Sophia's mum. You have to do what is best for you and what will make you happy. We'll be proud of you no matter what you decide. After dinner, Sophia went to her room. She looked through the photos on her phone that she'd taken when she was in Sheffield and Cambridge. She then opened her laptop and logged into UCAS. This is it, she said as she made her choices. Sophia felt relieved. Although Cambridge had been her lifelong dream, she realised that dreams can morph and change. She was still going to be a doctor, but she was going to be a doctor whilst keeping the things and the people she loved close to her. We hope you enjoyed this lovely English story. Would you make the same decision as Sophia? Tell us in the comments.